Hi there. My name is Carol Lee, and I am a staff member at Portland State Library's Special Collections. And I'd like to use this video to introduce you to our copy of the Malleus maleficarum. The book is bound in pigskin leather on wooden boards, and it is printed on paper. The pigskin covers, as you can see, they show some signs of wear and tear, some staining, and on the back cover there are some patches. Like this is a patch here. Looks like it's been repaired. The leather's been repaired. The edges, the corners and the edges are protected with these brass bosses, and in keeping with its, this is a common contemporary binding. It has these leather straps with these brass clasps, which given the age and the condition of this book, the binding is a little bit sprung, and so the clasps don't quite close anymore, so we leave them open. The papers are sewn on hemp cords, and you can see those cords kind of through the exterior to stain the leather, and the cords, the edges of those hempen cords that go through the binding, that have been pushed through these holes drilled in the wooden cover to hold the cover on. There must have been an end sheet or some type of front page on this book at one time that had some writing on it, because that writing has transferred over to the inside cover. This writing is, backward, so we know that it was sort of transferred onto there, and the page is now missing. You can also see this title page of the Fasciculus temporum has part of it missing, and it's been repaired. And numerous pages in this book have been repaired. This one is fairly straightforward because you can see the edge there, but there are also a lot, like you can see this sort of staining along this edge. This whole corner has been replaced and repaired. So this was definitely a working volume. Someone was using it. I don't know that the paper repairs are contemporary to 1490 or around that time, but I suspect that they're probably prior to the 18th century, just based on the staining and the type of paper. That's a guess, however. We also know this is a working volume because there are copious marginal notes inside. There's a lot of little handwritten notations. Mostly, I think, through both texts in the same hand, and in this sort of this brown ink, which we believe is oxgall ink. Could be notations from the 15th, 16th century in Latin. On the title page, on this front page, there's also an ex libris. Someone's written their name, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit because maybe one of you who can read Latin might be able to get a better look at it. I can. And the location underneath is a notation for the monastery at St. Noboris. And on the index page, I'm going to zoom out just again, just real quick. On the next page, down at the bottom of the page here, you can see also ex monasterio St. Noboris. So whoever was using this book could have been a monk at this monastery. The printing in this book is what we think is lamp black ink, or an ink that was made from a sort of a burned or coal material, a charred material that was scraped and then fixative added to make the ink. And then it's also moderately illustrated with wood blocks. This one on the frontispiece is the largest illustration in the book. In this one volume, there are two books in one. The first is this Fasciculus temporum, which is a world history or universal chronicle, written by Werner Rolewinck and published in 1490. Rolewinck was a monk in Cologne and wrote this book. I think the first editions of it came out in 1474, and it was published in over 30 editions up until the 1700s. And then the second book inside it, of course, is the Malleus maleficarum. The second edition of that book, also published in 1490, authored by Heinrich Kramer and Jakob Springer. Kramer is also known as Heinrich Institoris. He's probably the more widely cited author of the book, and these two books were printed in different places. So the world history, the Fasciculus, was published in Strasbourg in France, and the Malleus Maleficarum published in Speyer in Germany around the same year. And it's significant in a lot of ways for its layout. The way that it was printed was using these horizontal lines, which take advantage of the horizontal format of the book rather than a vertical format of a scroll, and these concentric circles or smaller circles, which are used, both of those sort of visual tropes are used to express the forward motion or the progressive action of time. So throughout this book, some of the years before the birth of Christ are noted upside down and recorded as Anno Mundi. Later on in the book, they're noted as Anno Christi, and they're right side up. So here's Anno Christi. The original printing of this came from a draft, like a manuscript draft that Rolewinck created, because he was very interested in having the history presented in this way so that it would be a visual presentation, in his words, to serve as a memory system and as a spark for religious meditation. It's got a few woodblock illustrations inside, some of cities, some of catastrophes like cities on fire. Sorry, I've got so many marginal notes in here because I wanted to show you everything. This woodblock, which we noted, I'm going to take this down and zoom this in just a bit. This illustration shows physical deformities occurring possibly as a result of a solar or lunar eclipse. And what we found interesting about this is, because this book is bound in the same cover as the Malleus Maleficarum, dealing with witchcraft, is that in this society you have prevalent thinking that eclipse could cause human deformity. And so this is a thinking that's going on at the same time that people are thinking that witches have the power to control whether or not crops thrive, or whether the weather is fair, or whether a person lives or dies. There are a few examples of marginal notations in both volumes, in the World Chronicle and in the Malleus Maleficarum. Some of these you can tell they're the same handwriting, but it looks to be that perhaps there was more than one reader, since some of these handwritings differ. Here's another one at the top of this page. Just a bit. Another one at the top of this page. Another one on this page here, and just throughout the book, little nota bene and little marginal notes within the text of the Malleus Maleficarum. This looks like possibly another handwriting, and these tricky little hands pointing at sections of the text and all. So we do know that this was a volume that was being used. Whether or not it was actually used by an inquisitor or someone who was trying witches, we don't know. We don't know who this writer would have been, but the kind of conjecture that we can make is that someone was certainly using this for research, to figure out either how to identify a witch or maybe how to conduct a witch trial. So about one half of the book is Rolewinck's world history, and then the other half is the Malleus Maleficarum, and it is separated by a few blank pages, so they are bound together. These are blank pages within this. Now this is the title page that we have for the Malleus Maleficarum. That's all it is. Someone has handwritten the author's name, Jakob Sprenger, but has omitted Heinrich Kramer's name. And here's a few blank pages, and there's a sheet here with a handwritten piece. I haven't been able to decipher this. I believe it's in Latin, but This paper has been torn and then repaired, and then this one torn completely and not repaired. So I could get a closer look at these for someone who might be interested in that. I'm happy to take some photos. The Malleus maleficarum, published in 1490. This is in its second edition, preceded by the papal bull from Pope Innocent VIII. And most of the book is printed in these double columns. I believe there are 3 sections, and there are these sort of blank spaces where larger capital initials would go. Some intrepid scribe rubricated the first 2 pages with these hand-drawn initials and markings at the beginning of each sentence in red ink, which we now know is vermilion, which contains cinnabar, and cinnabar naturally contains mercury. So a closer look at these would show that there's a little bit of silver shining through. The scribe that went through and began to rubricate this gave up after only 2 pages, and then the rest of it is unmarked, with the exception of, as I mentioned, a few marginal notes inside. There are no illustrations inside the Malleus maleficarum. There are larger headings in Latin that divide the sections of the book. But other than that, we have no illustrations and no woodcuts, no preceding paragraph initials. There's a few little insect holes in the paper as well. So the last piece that I'd like to show you has to do with the paper that it's printed on. Individual paper makers, paper artisans, would mark their papers with moisture to create a watermark, and that was, kind of impressed or embossed into the paper. And this book has at least 4 and probably more different watermarks on the paper that can tell us a little bit more about its provenance. This one I think is upside down, but you can kind of see the outline of what looks like maybe a capital letter P upside down and a small trefoil there by my finger. The most noticeable watermark in this book is on these blank pages that are separating the 2 texts, and it is this large, it's kind of hard to see, it's hard to get it, but it is this large bull's head, which you can kind of see that's upside down, and the initials M and E, and a serpent sort of climbing up from behind that. Let me see if I can get a better light on that. But that's the tête boeuf, or the bull's head watermark. The bull's head was a really common image for watermarks, but this one was particularly dramatic. We noticed it right away, and it's only on these blank pages that separate the volumes. So we think that, whoever bound these books together used this paper from another source. There are also a couple of variations on a watermark that looks like it has a little shield on it that's within the text of the Malleus. Hopefully you can get a glimpse of that one. There, it looks like there's a shield there with a globe floating above it, and maybe a crown on top of that, and a cross at the top of the whole thing. So quite hard to get on camera, but there are also some versions of that same little shield watermark elsewhere in the text that are much more simplified. This one, you can kind of see it there, shining there through the paper. So there's another watermark that's similar to that one at the beginning, the one I showed you first, that looks like a lowercase p or a p, that's within this Fasciculus as well. So the paper may have been from the same source. Okay, thank you. We don't know yet if we're going to be able to meet with students in person during the spring, but Special Collections is still going to be operating remotely during normal business hours for us, which are Monday through Friday between about 9 a.m. and 6 p.m. And we should be able to accommodate requests for additional images as long as we can get in the building within a 24-hour turnaround time. So if any of you have any interest in seeing any close-ups or any additional digital images than the ones that we already have, send us an email, specialcollections@pdx.edu, and we will do our best to accommodate that. In addition, we can also answer other questions about the book. Also by email is the best way to contact us. And since we'll be online every day, you can expect us to be able to respond to you pretty quickly. So yeah, let us know what you need, and we're happy to help. And good luck, and hope to be in touch this term. Thank you.